Water 7 is regarded by a lot of people as the best arc in One Piece, and with good reason, it's just that good. Everyone thinks this arc is peak. If Marineford isn't your favorite, this one probably is. And I guess Oda must have been pretty happy with it too, because 10 whole years later, he decided to do something very similar. Another rescue arc where a member of the crew leaves the group, and that arc was Whole Cake Island. Now in some ways, this is a pretty bold choice, because living up to Water 7 is a very big expectation. And there's two ways to look at this. One is that Water 7 is so good that it's unrealistic to expect anything else to be better than or even the same quality as it. And that's totally fair, because Water 7 is such an amazingly executed arc that it's just not something you can go out and do again. However, the second way of looking at it, which is the one I lean more towards, is that Oda already has the blueprint for this type of arc that he can look back at. He can see exactly what worked, why it worked, and what didn't work. Especially so because this is not the same Oda as before. He now has 12 more years of writing experience. All things considered, this arc should be amazing, but it isn't. And that's not to say that this arc is bad at all. I think it has some amazing stuff in it that I'm gonna talk about, but it just frustrates me because it really should not have the issues that it has. Now, some of you might think doing a rescue arc again where a member of the crew just randomly has to leave like Robin did is a bit of a cop-out to try to recreate the magic of Water 7, but I really couldn't disagree more. Maybe if someone like Chopper or Usopp left, I'd be like, yeah, what the fuck is bro cooking? This shit is not it.
This ain't it, chief.
But Sanji is the perfect and only character from the crew that could leave, because him leaving has been set up for years. Throughout so many arcs, Sanji has always put the lives of his crewmates above his own. Like when he boards the train in Water 7 completely alone without any backup against insurmountable odds, all for the chance to save Robin. And the biggest example, when he wants to take all of Luffy's pain from Kuma. Zoro is the second strongest crewmate, and taking this burden is his job, and yet Sanji insists on doing it instead. Where Zoro wants to do it out of duty and loyalty, Sanji is insistent of doing it because of his low self-worth. Even in Sanji's first appearance in the story, we can find this character trait. Sanji denies himself happiness by refusing to leave with Luffy because he feels like he owes Seth, even though he doesn't at all. Once again, he's putting others above himself, even when it's completely irrational. For both Nami and Robin, they also had subtle character traits and moments that eventually made their leave from the group make a lot more sense in hindsight. And so Sanji leaving makes 100% sense. And I think the setup for this was incredibly well done and some incredibly subtle character writing. But unfortunately, as much as this setup is really good, the execution does not deliver nearly as well as it should and is so inferior to Robin in Water 7. And the issue occurs almost immediately as the arc starts, as Bed shows up to invite Sanji to the wedding. Now, obviously, Sanji wasn't going to just go along with this because he was told so. He already had attacked the Big Mom pirates recently. He's not scared of them at all and is confident in Luffy becoming the Pirate King. So the story needed to come up with a reason to make him leave, which is when Vito whispers something in his ear. But what does he say? I don't know what he whispers to him because it's never revealed. I know a lot of people are just going to assume that he told him about Seth, but that doesn't really add up, because if we go to the scene where Judge reveals they have Seth's location, Sanji seems equally shocked and surprised, maybe even more surprised. Why would he be this surprised at something he was already told a few days ago? This is an issue because the reason Sanji decides to leave is never revealed to us, ever. Now, of course, we can't just assume that Oda just messed up a little bit and that he actually did whisper the Seth reveal, because ultimately that's the only thing that really makes sense. But this creates an even bigger problem, and what is really my biggest issue with Sanji's journey in this arc: his reason or reasons for leaving. After Sanji feeds Luffy, Luffy asks him to come back, but Sanji still refuses and gives him 3 reasons for that. The first one is that he hurt and insulted Luffy, his captain. This is a good and fair reason that I like. But reason number 2 is that Seth's life is being threatened and is basically being held hostage. In my opinion, this is a terrible reason from a storytelling perspective because it takes away all the agency from Sanji. Yes, Sanji technically makes the choice to leave, but he doesn't really have a choice. I mean, he could choose to not leave the crew and let Seth die instead, but that's not really a choice. Remember how I talked about Sanji not wanting to leave the Baradier because he felt indebted to Seth? Now imagine the reason he didn't want to leave was actually because Seth would die if he left. left. That will make the situation much less interesting because of course Sanji wouldn't leave. Why would he do that? He obviously doesn't want to let Seth die. That's just basic logic. Let's compare this to Robin. The reason why Robin leaves is because she thinks she doesn't deserve to live. She thinks she brings death and destruction to wherever she goes, and that she should die because she's not worth anything. Her choice to leave is 100% a character-driven choice. Of course, the government also threatened to kill the Straw Hats, but that's not really the same at all, as Luffy is a capable and strong pirate with a strong crew. The government's threat itself is not really a factor for Robin at all, more like an excuse for her to die, as she knows Luffy has a good shot at winning. In fact, there's proof of this. When Robin stops lying to herself and declares that she wants to live, she has no lack of confidence that Luffy can win. She fully believes in him. Seth, on the other hand, is an old man and is guaranteed to die if Sanji doesn't leave the crew. Seth effectively has a gun to his head, and if Sanji doesn't comply, they'll shoot him. And to make this issue even worse, we have the handcuffs. These will explode if Sanji leaves the island and make him lose his hands, meaning he can never make food again. Once again, obviously he's not going to go back to his crew. Doing so will kill his dad and blow his hands off. This is not a character-driven choice. It's a situation he was forced into disguised as a choice. But then, at the very last minute, his reason for not wanting to join Luffy has changed to something else again. We learned that Big Mom is planning on killing the Germa family during the wedding, and Sanji doesn't want that to happen. As much as he hates them, he can't let them die. Now, this muddies and complicates things a lot.
This is fucking bullshit.
Because Seth's life is still at stake here. Yes, Sanji has a new and different motivation now, saving his family from Big Mom. But that doesn't mean Seth is suddenly safe. In fact, saving the Vinsmokes is the only way for Sanji to protect Seth. If Sanji refuses to go through with the wedding and escapes with Luffy instead, Big Mom and Judge still have leverage on it and can kill Seth. As we know, Sanji and Luffy crashes the wedding, but Seth still survives and Big Mom doesn't kill him. This is because she most likely didn't care too much about that, and because the wedding is cancelled anyway. There is nothing to really blackmail Sanji about anymore. It's not the best reasoning, but it works. This makes it so that his choice to save his family is a lot less selfless than it originally seemed, when you consider that a big motivator for him to do it is to save Seth, not his family. So when Sanji says he can't leave because he can't abandon his family, and Luffy responds with, that isn't really true. Now, another issue is just how convoluted and complicated all of this hangs together. You probably lost brain cells just listening to me trying to explain it. These two panels are really similar in so many ways, and yet Robin's panel hits so much harder because the panel on the left is so tangled in plot mechanics and convoluted motivations. That being said though, I still think that Sanji's character throughout this arc is really solid. As much as he's been placed in some very messy and complicated circumstances from a story perspective, his reaction to these circumstances are really solid. When Sanji makes food for Pudding and all he can think about is making her happy, that's probably my favorite moment because it's proof that every time he has been willing to sacrifice himself for the crew before, it was 100% true. He had no hesitation. He's effectively trying to forget his previous life with the Straw Hats and sees himself as lucky to not only have been a part of the crew for as long as he did, but also lucky to get to marry such a beautiful wife. This again shows how low his self-esteem really is. He sees himself lucky to be in a position he's been forced to be in. The lighter panel is also a standout as we really feel sympathetic and bad for him. I thought his backstory as a kid also worked really well and gave us a believable reason as to why he is the way he is. So yeah, Sanji's journey in this has a lot of good qualities, but it also has a lot of elements that just kind of suck ass.
That shit was ass!
And because this is the most vital aspect of the arc, it already means it can't be the best One Piece arc or as good as Water 7. Now, some people might bring up another argument as to why it's not totally fair to compare the two arcs, which is the Straw Hats. Because where Water 7 had the entire crew coming to save Robin, here the crew splits in half. And while I fundamentally just don't agree with that line of thinking, it's also just not really true. Water 7 had a total of 7 Straw Hats if we exclude Frankie, and Whole Cake has 5, which isn't a huge difference, especially not if we factor in Jinbei and Carrot. I think it's totally totally possible to tell a compelling story about the Straw Hats even though not everyone is there. In fact, it should be easier to do so with fewer members so it doesn't have to try to give every single one of the 10 Straw Hats something to do. But with that being said, I truly think the most baffling decision made in this whole arc is which Straw Hats were chosen to be included in the arc. You would think that if a character was to leave the crew and only half of the remaining members could have gone to save that person, it would be the ones set up to have meaningful interactions with that character in the arc. I think Nami has good enough moments with Sanji, but I seriously cannot remember a single piece of dialogue between Chopper, Brook, Carrot, Jinbei, and Sanji. Why on earth was Chopper chosen to be a part of this arc, genuinely? Since this is a Sanji rescue arc, I think there are other members that would have worked way better. Like Robin. I mean, since these two panels have so many parallels, I think she could have had a bunch of interesting interactions with Sanji. She should know exactly the situation Sanji is in and what he's feeling. There's this great segment in Water 7 where Sanji boards the train to rescue Robin, but Robin completely shuts him down and denies him, and Sanji just can't understand why. There was a perfect chance to recreate this moment, but instead have Robin try to convince Sanji to come back. This would have further shown just how irrational Sanji's mindset in this arc was. Another person I think would be a no-brainer to include is Zoro. Now for me personally, I'm not a huge fan of Sanji and Zoro's rivalry. I think it's a bit of a repetitive gag that never really feels fresh or new and that never develops or goes anywhere. Like the gag has been the exact same as it was 900 chapters ago. And so my favorite moments between the two are always the ones where they're either forced to settle their differences and cooperate, or when they have a legitimate disagreement, not just for the sake of a gag. Zoro is the only person who has seen Sanji being willing to sacrifice himself for Luffy when Kuma shows up to kill him. So seeing how Sanji acts now by hurting Luffy and insulting him would give him a unique perspective on Sanji's actions that no one else has. When Nami and Usopp left the group in the earlier arcs, Zoro both times allowed it to happen and was adamant that they shouldn't return. Zoro hates people that lie to themselves, and so to him, it's less about what people are thinking and what their reasons for their actions are, but about what they say and what they do. When Usopp wants to join the crew again, Zoro refuses to let him join before apologizing. Usopp has said that he has left the crew, so in Zoro's eyes, until Usopp corrects that decision, he isn't a part of the crew. If Usopp just went back as if nothing happened, they would all be lying to themselves. In the same way Sanji's low self-worth finally came to a boiling point in this arc, this could have also been the moment where Zoro's moral code reached its own boiling point, and could have made their rivalry less than a repetitive gag and more of a real moment in the story where they actually had to work out their differences. What if instead of Luffy fighting Sanji here, Zoro fights him and doesn't hold back? Either that, or Zoro could have stepped in after Luffy loses. To him, until Sanji says otherwise, he is no longer a part of the crew and a traitor. By the end of the arc, before going into Wano, the two of them would have had a newfound respect for each other and finally altered their dynamic just a little bit. In Water 7, the divide between the crew is one of the best parts. It's what sets itself apart from all the other arcs, and I don't see why that couldn't have happened here too. Luffy and Zoro could have had a legitimate disagreement on whether or not to save Sanji. Now, I don't need these things to happen for this arc to be good. I don't need Zoro to be there. I don't need Robin, and I don't need drama between the crew. Hell, I don't even need Luffy in this arc. This could have been a Chopper solo mission, and I'm sure that could have been a really strong arc, but this wasn't. It's so bizarre to me because Chopper and Brook have no reason to be in this arc. They get no character development, and they do not interact with Sanji at all. In fact, Zoro and Robin have no real reason to be in Dressrosa either. We could literally switch places with the four of them and nothing would be lost. Let's look at what Robin needs to do in Dressrosa. She needs to meet the Tontadas and help Rebecca in the fight against Diamante, both of which Chopper can do. In fact, I'd say he's more suited to meet the Tontadas. And what does Zoro have to do? Literally just fight this rock. That's the only thing he does. Of course, Brook wouldn't be strong enough to beat Pika, but just rewrite how Pika's ability work or make him a bit weaker, and that's all we need. Now let's look at Chopper and Brook in Whole Cake. What does Chopper do in this arc? Nothing. Okay, great. Replace him with Zoro. In fact, I think it would have been a better opportunity for Zoro to get trapped in the mirror dimension instead of Chopper. Chopper and Carrot keep getting lost in there, which is much more fitting for Zoro considering his terrible sense of direction. He'd be running around and getting lost more than ever with all the mirrors. Now lastly, there's Brook, who doesn't really get any character development or anything in this arc, but to his credit, he does get to do a lot of things. A lot of cool things. Things that made me go, wow, Brook? He's kind of alright. He's kind of clutch, you know? But still, I think basically all of these things are things Robin could do, and honestly done better. First, he infiltrates Big Mom's castle with Pedro and spies around. This is exactly what Robin does in Wano. He then finds the poneglyphs and copies it on some pieces of paper. You know who is very knowledgeable about poneglyphs and who would have just been able to read it? Yeah. And then his biggest moment when he breaks Big Mom's picture. This would have been so much easier for Robin to do. I mean, her devil fruit is like tailor-made for this. She could have just spawned a hand in there and thrown it to the ground. Now, I get that Oda maybe wanted to include Chopper, Brook, Carrot, and Jinbei because they're not like normal humans, which is kind of this arc in Big Mom's whole shtick. But again, at least do something with that in the story to justify this decision. The only attempt at this is when Brook sleeps with Big Mom and she wants to keep him as a pet. Wow, that's so cool, man. Carrot and Jinbei also have nothing to do with Sanji in this arc, but I gotta say, Jinbei is pretty fucking cool. The moment when he says he doesn't fear Big Mom and Big Mom's ability doesn't work on him is incredible and one of the best moments in the arc, even though the paneling is abysmally bad, but still. And I love the scene before this where Jinbei does actually fear Big Mom still. This humanizes him a lot more and adds complexity to his character. So even though he doesn't have anything to do with Sanji, I still enjoyed his contribution a lot. Carrot, on the other hand,
it's the biggest piece of dog shit.
I've talked about how mid Carrot is in the past, so I won't spend too much time on that here. She's bland, uninteresting, never gets any character development at all, basically contributes nothing to the story. She sucks. And no, I don't think her seeing Pedro die counts as character development. So yeah, our heroes have a lot of problems going for them, but who I think has even more problems are the villains. First of all, there's too fucking many of them.
Yo, who is this nigga, man?
I know that Water 7 also has a lot of villains you kind of forget about too, but one, the arc is like twice as long, two, it still doesn't have more villains than Whole Cake, and three, at least every single one of them has a one-on-one battle against one of the Straw Hats. In Whole Cake, we have Big Mom, Katakuri, Oven, Daifuku, Cracker, Broly, Amande, Perospero, Smoothie, Kingbao, Montor, Oprah, Gillette, Randolph, Tamago, Flampe, Bobbin, this guy, all the Vinsmokes. I could go on. How on earth am I supposed to get invested in any of these guys? Even this fucking door is a villain. I get that Big Mom has like a million kids or whatever.
She belongs to the streets.
But I really feel like we could have given more spotlight to a select few characters and had the rest just kind of stand in the background a bit more. Like when Pudding and Sanji is making the cake, we get fucking Oven to pull up and try to stop them.
This nigga is trash.
A character we have just been introduced to. In fact, that's the only thing he does in the story. Why couldn't we have used an already established character to show up here? The same is kind of the case for Sanji's family. Like, did we really need 3 brothers when they're all basically the exact same character? The green guy is the only one that barely sets himself apart, but I could not tell you who is who between these two guys. This is obviously to show how they're all made to be the exact same as each other, but that doesn't make it any less boring. Judge is a fairly good character, I guess, but the real standout here is Reiju. She's been put into a situation she doesn't want to be in, but simultaneously feels like she can't leave. Very true to real family dynamics. What's interesting about Reiju is how many parallels she has to Robin. They have similar personalities, designs, both their name starts with R and is 5 letters long, and both want to die.
Damn!
And think that would be the best solution in their respective scenarios. This helps with this arc's theme of learning to confront the pain you've been running from, which is also a part of the reason Jinbei's moment with Big Mom works so well. Now, of course, Reiju isn't a villain. At the end of the arc, none of the Germa family characters are villains anymore. Only the Big Mom pirates are. And realistically, there is only one character out of all of these that is like legitimately good, and that's Katakuri. Everyone else is kind of trash. And he is real good. I think his fight with Luffy is incredibly solid, and the moment at the end where Luffy says he's gonna be the king of pirates and Katakuri responds by saying
This shit means something to me, man.
Is easily the best moment in this whole arc. I love how they both keep giving the other good character moments in the fight in the natural way like this. They bounce off each other so well. Honestly, if Katakuri was the main antagonist of this arc, I'd be looking at it a lot more leniently. But that's just the thing. Unfortunately, Katakuri is not the main antagonist. Big Mom is. Honestly, I don't think Big Mom is too bad, but she's really not great either. It's a bit difficult to put my finger on exactly what makes me not like her that much, but I'll try my best. Firstly, I think her motivation is kinda trash. It's very superficial and childish, which I get is on purpose, but we never really see her strive towards this goal in any way after we get introduced to her, or see it get challenged. Luffy and the gang just run away from her and remove any chance of that happening, and when we meet her in Wano, it's completely forgotten about. Thematically, she makes perfect sense for the arc, but she's never explored properly. Instead, most of her scenes is just her talking about food, and all her dialogue is just
Can you just shut the fuck up for 30 seconds?
Every time she gets her hunger pants, she just turns into a complete drone that has nothing interesting to say or do. I'll at least say that she felt more scary and intimidating than Kaido, especially with her soul fruit, which I thought was a pretty cool idea. So, we get a lot of generic and flat villains, one mid-villain, and an amazing villain, but I have not yet mentioned the best villain out of all of them, and the best part of this arc by far. Caesar fucking Clown. This guy is so fucking funny, bro. Easily one of the funniest One Piece characters. It's just hilarious how comically evil he is and how he just wants to do evil and fucked up shit, but keeps finding himself in the worst possible scenarios. He's not really a villain in this arc though, which is honestly for the best because I didn't find him very good in that role, and this suits him way better. It's honestly such a shame we didn't get to see him in Wano, because every single scene he's in is a 10 out of 10. This arc honestly has a lot of smaller individual moments like these that I think are great. Like for example, I didn't really like the whole forest sequence in the beginning, but I love that it plays a big role later in the story. Like when Luffy smashes the cake with all the clones, or Nami controlling Kingbound. It's such a fun gag that also serves as utility in the story. In fact, I love how much Nami is able to contribute to this arc. I love the moment when Luffy goes into the mirror dimension to fight Katakuri and Nami just says it's the captain's orders. It shows how much trust and faith she has in him. Her controlling Zeus is also really good because it's something only she can do. Remember how I said everything Brook did could have been done by other characters and in some cases done even better? Well, this could have only been done by her and is a big reason as to why it's so effective. There are moments like these sprinkled throughout the arc that makes me enjoy it a lot more than I otherwise would have, but unfortunately that's not enough. Whole Cake has a lot of good ideas and moments, but unfortunately it really fumbles the execution of the most important aspects. The Sanji versus Luffy scene is a scene I really wish I could enjoy, but I can't help but find it a bit hollow when one of the characters are effectively being forced not to be honest. That being said though, I think the pacing of this arc is a lot better and snappier than Wano, which is noticeably worse than this one, so make sure to check out this video to find out why that is.